From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
The White House releases a report on the U.S.'s retreat from Afghanistan as the Labor Department says the economy added 236,000 jobs in March. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, editorial board member Kate Batchelder-Odell and columnist Kim Strassel. Happy Friday to you both. 2 years after the American military's hurried evacuation of Afghanistan, including the terrorist bomb that killed 13 service members at the Kabul airport, the National Security Council has produced a 12-page report that blames President Trump. Let's start with a clip of White House spokesman John Kirby tangling this week with an NBC reporter.
Does the president take responsibility for the withdrawal and everything that happened thereafter?
He's the commander-in-chief, and he absolutely has responsibility for the operations that our men and women conduct and the orders that he gives. And he continues to believe that the order to withdraw from Afghanistan was the right one. And if you just look, Kristen, at what's happened since we pulled out of Afghanistan and see what the United States military has been better able to do on behalf of the American people, I think there's only one conclusion you can come to, and that it was the right decision.
Kate, what do you make of this report that was put out by the White House? What was the purpose behind it, and what does it say?
Well, Kyle, first of all, let's point out here that the White House decided to dump it out on late Thursday afternoon before a holiday weekend, while most of the press was focusing on Donald Trump's indictment. And I think that's a testament to how much they don't want to talk about Afghanistan. I think if you read this document, you'll see a 12-page narrative that really doesn't walk off any of their initial claims about the withdrawal. I think most of our listeners remember the scenes from the withdrawal from Kabul, people running next to Air Force planes, desperate to get out, clinging to landing gear, the 13 United States Marines we lost that you just mentioned. Biden has had 18 months to reflect on those scenes, and I think most voters would expect to see some humility, that he might do some things differently. And that is not what this document says. This document says that while it both takes credit that Biden wanted to withdraw, but also said that he had no choice to withdraw because President Trump had set a negotiation with the Taliban. It basically says that the rapid descent into chaos in Kabul was just a sad tragedy that couldn't have been avoided, when in reality, it was the product of some of Biden's decisions. One of those decisions was closing Bagram Air Base north of Kabul. Another one of those was his decision to pull the U.S. air support and maintenance contracting that the Afghans relied on to fight. So overall, Kyle, what we see here, it would be really, I use the term report pretty loosely because it is just a partisan narrative that really takes no responsibility for the awful tragedy in Kabul and just expects that voters will buy it.
Here's one line that jumped out to me. President Biden's choices for how to execute a withdrawal from Afghanistan were severely constrained by conditions created by his predecessor. And then after that is a long description. President Trump ordered direct talks with the Taliban without consulting with our allies. In September 2019, President Trump emboldened the Taliban by publicly considering inviting them to Camp David on the anniversary of 9/11. That was a huge controversy. Listeners probably remember hearing about it at the time. More than that, there's explanations of how President Trump signed an order to withdraw all forces from Afghanistan no later than January 15, 2021. And then a week later, he reversed that order. He tweeted to the surprise of military advisors that the remaining U.S. troops in Afghanistan should be home by Christmas. And so then there's this line: during the transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration, the outgoing administration provided no plans for how to conduct the final withdrawal or to evacuate Americans and Afghan allies. There were no such plans in place when President Biden came into office, even with the agreed upon full withdrawal just over 3 months away, unquote. And Kim, I go through some of those details in part because I find more than a little merit in those criticisms of the chaotic Trump leadership on foreign policy. But what I find so remarkable about this is that wasn't Biden's pitch to voters, is that make him president, put him in the White House, and the adults will be back in charge.
So to be clear, I was not a fan of Trump's decision to draw down and make this deal. And I have no doubt that had he remained president, he probably would have continued along that path too. Kate was pretty scathing about those documents. I'm going to actually attempt to outdo her. This is a scandalous document. It's gaslighting the nation. It's appalling because while some of the facts in there might be technically correct about decisions Donald Trump made, it completely ignores other details that were absolutely relevant. And also, as you say, Kyle, ignores the fact that Biden became commander-in-chief and Biden got to make the decisions after that point. The central fiction of this document is the notion that somehow this White House had its hands tied by what Donald Trump had previously agreed. The reality is that the deal that was made with the Taliban was contingent upon the Taliban fulfilling a number of conditions, which it brazenly refused to do, and it broke all the terms of that deal. As a result, it was Biden's obligation to reevaluate and also listen to his military advisors and his European allies, all of which were telling him not to pursue and draw down so rapidly. He ignored that. Let's remember, this is the guy who, according to former Defense Secretary Robert Gates, has never been right about a foreign policy decision in his entire life. He overruled everybody else that was out there. It's very clear that his goal in this was to have a triumph on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. That's what was motivating him. That's why he chose that symbolic date. And everything, all the catastrophe flowed directly from that. So yes, did the Trump administration make some mistakes in the way that it pursued this? Yes. But Joe Biden came in promising to be the adult and began with a clean slate, and this is pure fiction, what's presented in this document.
Kate, what do you make of this idea that the alternative of staying in Afghanistan with a residual U.S. force would not have worked and would not have been stable? That's another argument that is advanced by this report. Here's another line I'll read. There were no signs that more time, more funds, or more Americans at risk in Afghanistan would have yielded a fundamentally different trajectory. Indeed, the speed with which the Taliban took over the country showed why maintaining 2,500 troops would not have sustained a stable and peaceful Afghanistan, unquote. Kate, what do you make of that argument?
Well, a lot of Biden's advisors suggested that he leave a residual force there of a few thousand troops complemented by NATO troops. And so he presents this false choice that his only options were to bring everyone home or to commit tens of thousands of troops. And I think that's a false choice. I think we've seen Milley and Frank McKenzie, who are both general officers who were advising Biden at the time, say that that was not their best military advice. And so I don't think there's any reason to think that he would have had to commit tens of thousands more troops. Also, I just would revise and extend my previous remarks that Biden's decisions really hastened the fall of the Afghan forces. He chided them as unwilling to fight after he had removed the air support and maintenance contracting that they relied on to fight. This is how we trained them to fight. And then we made those resources unavailable. And then we said, look, they won't fight. So again, the descent in Afghanistan was a product of his choices. It was not some inevitability of history. And it's conveniently unprovable that it would have taken tens of thousands of troops to have anything else. What we do know, Kyle, and we can talk more about this, is that since this happened, since everyone in the world saw those images of America getting out of Afghanistan and in full retreat, the world has gotten more dangerous and harder to manage. And we've seen all sorts of authoritarians, including Vladimir Putin, emboldened to, for instance, roll across the border of Ukraine. So this idea that we've had to commit more troops and that this was the more stable option and made America safer, I don't see much support for that view in what we're seeing around the world.
But the White House is taking different lessons. I mean, there is a bit of connection that it makes between Afghanistan and Ukraine, but it takes the opposite conclusion. It says our standing around the world is significantly greater as evidenced by multiple opinion surveys. And then it also says that it is hard to imagine the U.S. would have been able to lead the response to Ukraine successfully if U.S. forces remained in Afghanistan today. And so, Kim, I mean, I guess I agree with Kate that one of the most disheartening points of this is the real failure to grapple with the message that went out around the world when the live TV images of the American harried evacuation were being carried everywhere.
Those images, which, by the way, were not just being watched and absorbed by Americans, but by every rogue leader around the planet. And the message that it radiated was America is fleeing Afghanistan. America does not stand by its commitments. America is not going to get in your face if you decide to do something wrong. And you can draw a direct line between the Afghanistan debacle and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China's increasing belligerence in the Asian hemisphere, the Saudis' decision to begin to cozy up a little bit more to China and others because it suddenly didn't believe that America might be an effective ally. So the consequences of this have been extreme. They have fed growing global disorder that we see. And for the White House to look at this and to continue celebrating what it did. By the way, can we just point out, how do you both say that you did a great job and then blame it all on your predecessor? You can't have both of those things at the same time. And so the idea that it just continues to suggest that this was a good move and a good look for the United States and that we're in a better condition. Just as a side note, what exactly is our new China policy now that we're no longer entangled in Afghanistan? Because even most foreign policy experts are struggling to understand what that is. I don't see real change. And, again, this is a document. It reads a little bit like a Joe Biden re-election campaign document trying to absolve him of responsibility.
Hang tight. We'll be right back. You're listening to Potomac Watch from the Wall Street Journal.